August 24, 1895, Daily Mail and Empire, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Ghosts in Scottish mansions. Some of the castles in the land of the thistle that are haunted. Scotland, the land of deep enthusiasm and poetic feeling, is essentially a land of superstition. Witness the firm belief of the peasantry in the weird traditions of the West and the Highlands, in the uncanny apparitions, foreboders of evil to the family to whom they belong, and their avoidance of the so-called abodes of ghosts and evil spirits. Nor do they stand alone in their beliefs. Among the upper class, credence is given to much that is supernatural, and not without cause, as the history of the ancient castle of Glamis in Forfarshire relates. Although the whole house abounds in mysterious noises and ghostly visitors, one chamber, in particular, is known as the haunted room, and access to this fearsome place is only known to Lord Strathmore, his heir, and the factor. There is no doubt whatever about the noises. One night, when they were more weird and unearthly than usual, the present Earl, with several chosen companions, determined to investigate the cause and went to the room. Hardly had his lordship opened the door when he fell back swooning, nor could he ever be persuaded to tell what he saw or even mention the subject. One old story is that during a feud between the Lindsays and Ogilvies, some of the latter clan, in flight from their enemies, besought hospitality from the owner of Glamis. He gave them shelter in this room, but, under plea of hiding them, left them there to starve. It may have been the sight of the ghastly remains which startled the Earl, but whatever it was, is still a secret. Another story is that of Earl Patty, celebrated for many vices, but above all for that of gambling. He played continually, hobnobbing with his humblest servitor, could he not obtain another partner. However, one Lord's Day, no one could be persuaded to play with him. The chaplain heaped anathemas on the head of anyone who dared to desecrate the Sabbath by touching the devil's books, as he designated cards. Earl Patty, rather than be thwarted in his desire, invoking the foul fiend to be his partner, locked himself into his room. The deal came, and then the fun was fast and furious. Curses, oaths, and shrieks terrified the inmates, and the butler, braver than the rest, putting his eye to the keyhole, had it sorely scorched for his curiosity. The Earl, coming out for a minute to get the wherewithal to settle up, returned only to find the room empty, and nowhere could any trace of his ghostly comrade be found. After his death, 5 years later, the same noises were constantly heard issuing from the room and along the corridors. Allen Bank, the seat of the Stuarts, is haunted by the ghost of Pearlin Jean. She was the wife of the first baronet, and a Frenchwoman, whom he married in Paris and deserted. When returning to his native land, she appeared at the last moment to bid him goodbye and stood on the forewheel of the coach to address him. Much annoyed, he bade the postilion drive on. The lady fell, and the wheels, going over her head, killed her. On his arrival home, when driving under the arched entrance gateway, Sir Robert saw Pearlin Jean sitting on the top, her head and shoulders covered with blood, and for years the rustle of silk and patter of Louis XIV heels were heard along the passages. There is perhaps no more notorious ghost than the Airlie drummer. His haunt is an ancient stronghold, Courtehie Castle, belonging to the Earls of Airlie. Whenever his drum is heard, those around take it as a sure token of the speedy death of one of the Ogilvie family. The origin of the story is that the jealousy of a former Lord of Airlie was roused either by the drummer or the officer whose messenger he was. In rage, he thrust the man into his drum and flung him out of the window of the tower in which the music is usually heard. The victim threatened, if his life were taken, to haunt the family, and he has been as good, or rather as bad, as his word. The music of the hapless drummer has often been heard, and quite recently, within the memory of those living. In 1844, before the death of Lady Airlie, and in 1849, before the death of the 9th Earl. Spedlin's Tower, now a ruined border fortress, was long haunted by the spirit of a miller named Porteus who, being suspected of arson, was incarcerated in the dungeon by Sir Alexander Jardine. Having occasion to go away from home, he forgot all about his prisoner, who perished of hunger. No sooner was he dead than his ghost began to torment the family, and gave them no rest night or day. At last, by the aid of several ministers, the demon was exorcised, and a Bible was placed in a niche in his cell. Years after, it was thought necessary to have the Bible rebound. Accordingly, it was sent to Edinburgh for that purpose. It had not been long on its way before the ghost left his dungeon, flew over the river to the new home to which the family had recently removed, hauled the baronet and his wife out of bed, causing much terror and disturbance. Only through returning the Bible to its niche in its old condition was Porteus's revengeful ghost quieted and peace again restored. Woodhouse, the seat of the Fraser Titlers, is visited by the spirit of Lady Hamilton, a Bothwellhaugh. Her husband is known as the murderer of the Regent Murray Linlithgow in 1569, and surely no assassin had ever greater provocation. Knowing Hamilton was from home, the regent seized his house, turned his wife and child naked out into the fields. Before morn she was a raving maniac, her infant dead, probably murdered, and now her restless spirit haunts the abode of her former happiness. Part of the masonry of the old building was used for the present mansion, which is built on the Pentland Hills 4 miles distant from the scene of the tragedy. And but a few years ago the domestics were terrified by the apparition of a lady, robed in white, holding a child in her arms, which shows the spectre is still faithful to her old home. The Inverary ghost is another well-authenticated story, the hearse of which dries up to the door of the castle before the decease of any member of the Argyll family. It is said, during the illness of the late Duchess, that 2 of the servants at Inverary were resting in the gloaming, heard the noise of wheels, unbarred the great door of the entrance hall, and, on opening it, found nothing there. Shortly afterward, they heard of the death of their mistress. Dunvegan, the home of the MacLeods, the oldest inhabited castle in Scotland, is visited by those delightful spirits, fairies. There is still the fairy flag, given centuries ago to the chief of MacLeod by the fairies, and which always brought them victory when they took it to battle. A room in the tower is devoted to them. Music and dancing are often heard, but all vanishes when the door is opened. The Gentleman.